Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Survivor 45 following episode 12, the last episode before the finale. And I feel like this episode was fine for the most part. I feel like it more so reinforced how I felt coming into the episode. And while there's definitely interesting things to talk about here, I feel like this is more so solidifying my view of these people coming into the finale, which we'll be talking about more in a moment. But there are 6 people to talk about, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 6, we have the boot from this week, and here we have Drew. And I kind of saw this coming, where I said last week that I feel like Drew got a really bad episode here, was obviously put in a bad spot after losing Emily. And I feel like with him being portrayed negatively, with him being shown being the one to rock the boat, I felt like it was just leading up to his eventual downfall here. That and also the fact that, as I said for much of the season, he's been presented as this big character that will eventually be taken out. And sure enough, that's what ended up happening here. He does get a pretty massive downfall in it here, where a lot of it's more the same with him being contradicted along the way, him being super confident in a lot of things, like him talking about how no one will win an Oscar due to how bad of an actor everyone is, only for Dee to immediately contradict him. We also have his extreme overconfidence during a lot of the episode as well, with him talking about how things went wrong last time, but now nothing can go wrong. Julie has to go out, which to me just was kind of screaming out that he was just overconfident, that things were going to go wrong, as he said in his own confessional here. Just a lot of dunking on Drew that eventually led to his eventual downfall here. You also have a bit of a follow-up to Jake from a couple episodes ago, where obviously he got mad at Drew. They got into that big fight. Then afterwards, Jake said that he couldn't trust him anymore, and that in this episode, he said that he doesn't want to go along with the plan and take out Julie, which obviously led to him wanting to target Drew here. Again, just a lot of things going wrong for Drew, to where his actual boot here made sense from Ed's standpoint. So obviously there's that. I feel like in terms of the game that he played, it's definitely an interesting game to say the least. Now I will say that compared to other players in his archetype, this sort of big character, the Carsons, the Jessies, the Omers of the world, I feel like Drew is not as good of a player compared to those people, where I feel like he made a number of questionable calls during the season. Like his whole thing of rejecting the alliance with Brando, I felt like that was kind of insane. Now yes, he did say in his exit interview that he felt like Brando was entrapping him by making him purchase allegiance to Brando so that he could go back to Austin and Emily and claim that Drew's not with them anymore. But I still feel like it's bad that he actually said to Brando's face that he doesn't want the alliance there. I feel like his fight with Jake was also unnecessary and also painted a target on his back. And I feel like his threat management was obviously not great at all, really. But he still played a relatively dominant game. He was obviously in the majority alliance for most of the game. He was obviously in a lot of control throughout a lot of the game there. And I feel like through that, he's obviously going to be relatively high in the player ranking. But again, I'm not really expecting him to make my top 10 players of the new era videos, so there's that. But obviously he is now out of the game, which is why he's here at number 6. And before we continue, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Russell Muscle TV, who I'm partnering up with this season to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles so you can practice them and be just like Carson from Survivor 44. We got all different selections here, including the fire puzzle, the snake to the top puzzle, the 5-piece puzzle that Spencer solved in 5 seconds from Survivor Cambodia, and more. If you want to take home Survivor puzzles made by superfans for superfans, feel free to click the link in the description and start shopping now. And with that, there are 5 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win based off their edit and current game position going into the season finale, which should be pretty exciting. But number 5, the player I believe is the least likely to win from this point on, is Julie. And the reason I have Julie at the bottom is I feel like she's the one person in this final 5 I am confident will not make it to the end of the game. We have seen her being talked about as a big threat for the last couple of rounds now, and obviously she was a key target during those last 2 rounds. And plus, she failed to get the idol in a spot where Jake ends up getting it instead, and it's obviously going to be in play coming into the final 5. And I feel like Julie fits this trend that we've been seeing in recent seasons, where obviously the player propped up as a big threat tends to get taken out around final 5. So I feel like through that, 5th place makes a lot of sense for Julie based off the edit that she's gotten and obviously the game that she has played. Though I could also see her losing in fire, which obviously could be interesting there. But really, I just don't see how she actually gets to the end. I feel like other players have more setup to get to final tribal even if they are technically in a losing position over Julie. Which I will say, I feel like these last couple episodes have made me think that Julie has a good amount of win equity. Obviously, she is a big threat. She is someone that people have their eyes on. She's obviously talked about pretty highly in Drew's exit interview, like through her creating all these Final Three alliances. It really sounds like she was playing very actively and trying to position herself, but obviously she ends up getting exposed, and that's a big reason why she is targeted now at this point. But obviously that's more for the player ranking. I feel like in terms of her actually winning the game, I feel like it's very unlikely based off the edit that she has gotten at this point, which is why she is here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we have another player that I'm pretty certain is not winning at this point, and here we have Austin. And I feel like this was another episode that confirmed to me that Austin is not winning. Now obviously he's been getting a lot of focus due to his relationship with Dee. That's been a whole focus during the whole reward challenge there. He obviously gets his intro package in this episode where he talks about how he used to be pretty nervous, but now he's gotten pretty confident. It's actually very similar to the story that we saw with Xander at the end of 41. So I found that comparison pretty interesting, which is cool and all. But again, I feel like it's just too late in the season for it to actually mean anything. Though I will say that this episode has actually made me more confident that Austin could actually get to Final Tribal, where obviously we learn in this episode that he actually wants to get to the end with Dee. In that moment where he lays that out is even subtitled. You also have later in the episode where we obviously have his whole thing about wanting Drew to stay and Dee having this whole dilemma, very similar to the dilemma that Austin had last episode. And I'll talk about that more when I get to Dee. But I feel like that whole situation, which culminates in Dee not telling Austin about the plan, which results in Austin getting blindsided, obviously, is also a good contrast between Austin and Dee that would make a lot of sense if they got to the end together, where we see Austin as someone who gives in to his emotions, where obviously he tells Dee about the plan from last episode because he doesn't want to hurt Dee's feelings and potentially lose that relationship. He obviously has an emotional bond to Dee, while Dee in this episode is put in a very similar situation, but she talks about putting her emotions aside and she's able to not tell Austin about the plan. And again, I feel like that's just setting up this contrast that could play out Final Tribal, where people will respect Dee's game more due to her being able to put emotions aside while Austin was unable to. And he obviously tells Dee about the plan last episode, which at this point has shown to be a pretty bad move as he ends up losing 2 of his closest allies back to back in Emily and Drew. And obviously he's just set up to eventually lose the game in my eyes. So obviously those are all things that are pretty bad, things that make me think he's not winning. Though, again, the one consolation prize is that it makes me more confident he's actually getting to the end, even if he's not winning. But again, all of it's pretty bad. He's here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and we have someone who I have a very similar opinion about, though I did drop them, and here we have Jake. And again, this was more of the same for Jake. He's obviously still at the bottom, still wants to play the game, and obviously we have him wanting to make a big move, where he obviously finds the idol, he talks about wanting to do something flashy in front of the jury, and we even see him wanting to execute this Drew blindside here in a way that would give him a lot of the credit here. But along the way, he gets undermined, where obviously he talks about not wanting Dee to know about the plan, even though it immediately cuts to Dee knowing about the plan. And while he does technically get his way with getting Drew out, it's in a way that doesn't give him the credit. I feel like it gives credit to other people. I feel like he doesn't really use the idol in this round to make a move. I feel like his only real way of using that idol at this point is at Final 5, where he probably just uses it on himself, if I'm being honest. I feel like it's just going to be a big nothing burger. And again, I feel like this episode was more the same. He has talked about this over and over again of him wanting to make a big move, wanting to be a big player, and then we just don't see it. He hasn't really stepped up to the plate. He hasn't really gotten his way in a lot of cases, and I feel like people are just not taking him seriously. So I feel like coming into this, he's going to lose. But again, similar to Austin, I feel like he's very likely to get towards the end. I actually feel like I'm the most confident in Jake getting to Final Tribal and losing. But again, when we're talking about people actually winning the game, I feel like it's just not there with Jake. And because of that, he is here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and I did decide to bump up this person over Jake this week. And here we have Katurah. Now, is Katurah winning? No, I don't think so. But I think she has a bit more of a case compared to Jake, where obviously she does get a good amount of content this week with her trying to find idols, even though she is unable to find one herself. And even beyond that, she has been getting more content. And I feel like she's being taken a bit more seriously than someone like a Jake, but I still feel like she's not going to win. Again, going back to Drew's exit interview, there's apparently like this whole thing during the last tribal about her like being under the radar, which I think could come back to bite her by the end of it, which I think ties into her overall jury perception. I still think there's a shot that Katurah gets to final tribal as well. Like, I feel like if it's not Austin, it's probably Katurah. Though again, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I still think there's a shot she could lose at Fire given that whole situation there, but we'll have to see what happens. I think there are a number of ways that Katurah could go, but the one that I think it will not lead to is a win. So for that reason, I do have her here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 45 coming into the finale is still Dee. And again, this episode didn't do much to change that perception. I feel like this was just more great content for Dee, with her talking about how she had to be an actress, like after the Emily tribal. She had to not give the game away, and she has shown being pretty successful in doing so, and she's shown being a good player in doing so. How normally she is a bad actor back at home, but she has to turn on for the game, which I feel like is pretty good there. Obviously, later on, she's shown being pretty aware about what's going on, like between Katurah being missing from camp. Later on, where Jake thinks that she doesn't know about the Drew plan, she very well is. And as I said with Austin, she was put in a very similar spot to Austin as last week. It's literally roles reversed now. Where obviously last week, Austin was so worried about hurting his relationship with Dee that he ends up leaking the plan to her, which causes her to tell Julie and in turn like cause the whole thing to blow up essentially. Now we see Dee in a similar situation where obviously she knows that Austin is close with Drew and she contemplates telling Drew about the plan, but along the way like she gets to talk about how like she needs to keep her emotions in check and that it's difficult to manage emotions, but at the end of the day, that's what you have to do. And ultimately, she does end up not telling Austin about the plan. And sure enough, Austin is blindsided here, despite him having a chance to save Drew through him using his amulet on him. So obviously, I feel like that's a very solid contrast here, where Dee is shown being the more rational player, the one who is more willing to make the move versus leaning into her emotions. And I feel like that's a big thing that's going to contribute to Dee getting the win here. Now, obviously, there's one other thing to bring up. It's the fact that she does win the immunity challenge that is balance-based, and there's no mention of her big toe here, which I did find a little funny, even though it's relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. So I did find that kind of funny. But really, I think Dee is by far the contender to win here. I feel like this has been the coronation that will lead to a Dee win. And Dee is the person I am expecting to win on finale night. And for that reason, I do have her here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out the channel. Now, on finale night, I will be live streaming the finale, so you can stay tuned for that. And obviously, once the season is done, you can expect a player ranking and a review, more than likely, so you can look forward to that. Same thing with Survivor UK, which is also wrapping up, and a team ranking for the Amazing Race 35. It's really weird how all these shows are wrapping up all at once, but that's just the way things are at this point. And obviously, once everything is done, I'll probably be doing more general Survivor content in the lead up to the new year and all the new shows that'll be coming out then, so you can stay tuned for that. I'm on Patreon now, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that's the video. See ya.